Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second panel of this wonderful forum of the KBBC. The second panel is focused on higher education, and we would like to begin to send our condolences to those colleagues of ours, two of our colleagues who lost their lives yesterday in serving at Kurdistan universities and at Salahuddin University. And on the requests that we received from the panels and from the attendees and the panelists, we would like to begin with a 1-minute silence for those who lost their lives yesterday for serving higher education. Thank you. My name is Nahro Zagros, and I have the pleasure to share this stage with the distinguished speakers, Sirwan Baban, Chief Scientific Advisor to the President of Kurdistan Regional Government, of Iraq, and Victoria Lindsay, former country manager, British Council of Iraq, and then Karzan Khwaraham, Senior Advisor to the Prime Minister of Kurdistan Region. The theme of this panel generally is related to two interrelated questions, which are modernizing education and higher education sector in Kurdistan Region, and also how to attract international partners to work with Kurdistan universities, Kurdish schools, and to partner with this vibrant sector of Kurdistan Region. I would like to begin by asking a general question for those who have interest in higher education but perhaps don't have much information. And that's why, Dr. Sirwan, if I may start with you, to give us a general idea where we are in higher education and education in this country. Because in the past 10, 15 years, it's always been the interest of Kurdistan government to modernize the sector, to make it more attractive, to put Kurdish universities on the world map of scientific universities around the world. But have we achieved that? And where we are generally, give us some brief perhaps, and then we'll kick off with general questions. Yes.
I'm Tambash. صباح الخير جميعا. Good morning. For me, universities don't exist in a vacuum. Universities have a role, have a mission.
Yes.
The mission of university is, the reason it exists is really to energize and to lead the social and economic development and the well-being of society. And as society evolves socially and as technology advances, the university also will need to keep up.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it'll become inefficient and irrelevant. There have been lots of attempts for our university to advance our universities, but based on the international indicators, we really need to do a lot more.
Yeah. So in Kurdistan, we have 15 public universities and 15 private universities. Do you think they are up to the world standard?
It depends what indicators do you use. If you look at the research output, if you look at the impact factors,
yeah,
if you look at the international ranking, as I said, there is a long, long way to go. And there are reasons for that. I mean, it's not all fault of the universities. There's systematic reasons, there's financial reasons, there are management reasons, which hopefully we're going to talk about later.
Okay, thanks. Lindsay, if I may come to you, you've worked with British Council and you've involved with people from education and higher education in Kurdistan region and in Iraq. And what's your assessment? What are the challenges that are facing employability? Because so many graduates are graduating everywhere at universities and private schools, but they struggle to find jobs. What are the challenges in terms of employability?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Dr. Victoria Lindsay, formerly of the British Council, now working independently, but my background is in higher education, where I've spent 20 years in UK and transnational education. Looking at the sector from the external, there is this big mismatch between the output of graduates from universities and the employer needs. And it's around how we can look at the curriculum and the skills and the transferability of the skills that young people are learning in the universities to try and balance close that gap between what is coming out of a university and what an employer actually needs. Because a lot of the time people are saying that it's not that there aren't jobs, it's the fact that the young people don't have the skills required in order to apply for those jobs. So I think that that's one area that we could really look at focusing on.
Yeah. Perhaps, when we talk about putting Kurdish universities on world map and to compete with other universities in the region and in the world, we also talk about partnering with well-established institutions around the world. So in your mind, how can you partner between Kurdistan universities and British universities, for example?
So, there's various recognised partnership models. The British Council did commission a piece of work when I worked for them, which is actually translated into both Arabic and Kurdish, which is a report around partnerships, and it was written by a professor called Colin Rayburn. And we actually looked at that very question, the different partnership models and the barriers to partnerships. So that would be a good place to start. People talk a lot, when you talk about the sector, they say, oh, we should have a joint degree or a dual degree or a twinning degree. And even we touched on this last night over dinner. And it's around actually, when you talk about those, do you really understand what these mean? First of all, when you're going to a UK university and saying we want a dual degree, do you actually understand what a dual degree is? Firstly, the model. And then secondly, it is around the risk factor for a UK university. So if they are offered a partnership, for example, in Saudi Arabia, and they're offered a partnership in Kurdistan, what is the attractiveness of working with a Kurdish university as opposed to working with a Saudi university?
Yeah.
And that is where, when you start to look across the region, some countries, Saudi Arabia is one of them, UAE is another, there's a huge investment in the university infrastructure to try and achieve that international footprint. So I think it's around sometimes managing the expectations of Kurdish universities so that they're looking maybe at smaller partnerships that might then grow into something bigger, as opposed to asking for a very large partnership, which might not be so achievable.
Yeah. Thank you. Kak Kazan, I want to come to you and specifically ask you about accreditation. One of the challenges that are facing Kurdistani universities is accreditation. In fact, none of our universities, public universities and private universities in this country, are accredited by international bodies. For that, I think the Prime Minister came up with this initiative to create another council, accreditation council, and you've been involved in negotiating with the Ministry of Higher Education, with the Parliament, and the Parliament ratified the bill a few days ago. I think you were involved, so perhaps you can tell us about this new initiative that is coming in Kurdistan region.
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity, and I really appreciate being here. And basically, I start with your question, which is really relevant to what we are doing today. So the first initiative, which His Excellency started and recommended us, was putting an accreditation body. And the accreditation body is obliged to put standards, and the standards, it must be in the international level. So we must put the standards into the international level. To do so, we managed for the first time last week, the Kurdistan Accreditation Society was born, and we're proud of this. That's a first step that we can put a standard into international standards we can apply to evaluate and accredit our universities plus our schools. So that's a first step, and we have got many steps ahead of us.
Yes.
That is about accreditation, but if you want to go in more detail, I can give it.
So when is this board is going to kick off and start working with universities?
Basically, it needs to go to be approved by the president of our region. Then it will be announced by the legal department, and then officially, hopefully, before September, it will kick off. And we need support from everyone, particularly from the both ministers, Minister of Education and Minister of Higher Education, and the colleagues, academic staff around the world, and as well as local experience in that field.
And Kakas, and perhaps you could also elaborate whether you only work, this board is only going to work with public universities or private universities as well?
No, we will cover every institution in Kurdistan, whether in private sector as well as public sector, and plus all the schools.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Silwani, if I come back to you, in the past 10, 15 years in Kurdistan region, on university level, on ministerial level, on government level, always we talk about quality research. And this is something fundamental to modern higher education and education around the world, but it's something lacking in Kurdistan. That's why we address this problem all the time. And for the first time this year, the KRG government allocated a huge amount of fund to quality research. So tell us where we are with quality research and why it's a challenge for putting Kurdish universities on the world map.
I'm glad you asked that question. Research and research training is a fundamental part of what a university offers the societies is embedded in. The research has to be relevant in terms of topic, and then you get rid of the disengagement between the university and the society and the government. So we need to identify priority areas that are relevant to us. We live in a region, we have problem with water. In terms of rivers, we know our neighbors are building dams, so less quantity of water coming down. We have a problem with agriculture. Iraq formally announced they cut down their prediction by 50%.
Yes.
A further complicated issue is climate change impacts. We know that an increase of 1 degree leads to a decrease of 10% of agricultural production. We also know by 2015, Iraq will undergo 2 degrees of increase. So it's 20% of agricultural production. We also know that the crops that we have will not grow. So we need to focus on climate-ready crops, rice, wheat, barley, that are resistant to temperature and could grow in salinity and other boundary conditions. These are topics we need to focus on for research. This will make the universities relevant, and they could contribute into everyday life. But also we need to be the level. It has to be at the international level. Now, to do that, we need to train our staff in what is research, how to conduct research, what's the difference between research, consultancy, and innovation, and link it to government's work. I'd love to see an agenda from the government that tells us these are all priority areas, for example, Ministry of Planning and the other ministries. Then the universities will start developing graduates to fill those gaps, which is my colleague talked about, which is what we call a graduate profile. Universities are not creating graduates for unknown. They're creating graduates for upcoming jobs that are in the future and with a real impact. We need to have funding for research, quality research, and I don't think we should shy away from elitism.
Yeah.
We need to have centers of excellence for research for certain universities, then the other universities will come along. We need to look for the research priority areas. For the region, we need to look for partnerships with the UK universities. So we could develop our staff, also deliver the outputs that hopefully become part of the decision-making process for the government that improves everybody's life.
But as you are aware that we have huge challenges facing quality research. For example, at every university, we have a journal. And this journal is only accredited by the Ministry of Higher Education. It has no impact around the world, and it cannot reach the world audience. So in today's global market, in today's globalism, this is a huge problem for Kurdish universities. How do we overcome this problem?
And it's a huge problem. I think we've somehow created a bubble that we live in. The levels are very clear. There's international level, there is national level, and there is a regional and there is a local level, even for the journals that we publish in and we do the work in. It's not a matter of quantity, it's a matter of quality. And the quality is clear. You need to do the work and you need to produce world-class research to make it into international reference journals. Are we there? We're not there. How do we know? Look at the ranking of our universities, and research active staff and their products and their PhD students feature heavily within those rankings. And we don't do very well there. So I think it's about time we start a reform agenda. We focus on that and stop looking outward for solutions. We have the solution here. I worked 26 years abroad as a professor, as dean, as pro-vice chancellor. When our people come there, they always succeed. They've always succeed.
When our people
come
go
abroad. I worked in Australia, I worked in the UK, I worked in the Caribbean. We can't do that here. So for me, the fault is not in the raw material, not in the people. The fault is in the system. We have to revise the system, and we have to be brave to tackle it.
And Kakas, and perhaps this is a segue to start this question with you. Have we addressed this challenge? Are we finding a solution to the problem?
As a matter of fact, that to address these problems, we need to look at three aspects. One is a culture, and second one is a law for education, and the third one, the system for education. So we cannot just look at one aspect and narrow down for one guideline, or we need to have a holistic approach to address all the issues which we are facing and become a challenge for us and become a barriers to compete with other international universities around the world. So we must start from the scratch. So we must start from the education ministry. So basically, there are three fundamental issues with the laws, which is plus our cultural communities. Number one, the philosophical foundation of education is not right so far. So we have put it a law, but they are not for this generation. We are living in technology era, which needs a lot of effort to be done by the government as well as the students. So we need to change the philosophy or foundation of education. So that's the number one. Otherwise, we cannot address all the issues. The number two is general principle of education. So what are the principles of the education for this new generation? You need a student who aware of the globalization challenge. And number two, we need a student who can be responsible, accountable. But we have not set up the law for this. And the third issue is really important. The principle of education. You need a student who can lead with well-occupied skills for life. We have not put any guidelines or any laws for that three principles, so we cannot expect much for now. So if we don't, and the third one, we have got a problem, participation from the parents. We have not engaged the parent to collaborate with schools, universities, and be a part of the solution rather than become a burden on our education system. So that is a fundamental element. We need to address it before we making any change, because the output of the education is going to higher education. If you don't tackle the problem at the root, you don't have a chance to produce a better quality student to serve the industry. Because if you don't, like in a first stage, children will shape in a very early age. Someone said maybe when they are 6 months old, and someone new theory said, okay, 6 years old. Someone said 13 years old. So we have to address and tackle the problems at the root. That's in terms of the how we can do. And in terms of the what we can do for the higher education. Of course, like we have started with putting international standard by establishing the first time by His Excellency support, and I should not forget the support from Dahog University and Dr. Huna, and the support from international organization. And the support from the both ministries, that we managed for the first time establishing Kurdistan Association accreditation. So that's the first step we have done it for, to raise the standard. Okay. But we have many issues to overcome. Promoting our staff is a huge problem, because basically we are promoting our staff based on the research papers, but there are many other criteria. We need to look what the other criteria using in international universities that need to be implemented in our guideline for promoting our staff. That's number one. And we have got a lot of issues, like admission to the universities is a huge problem, because from the first day we are putting the student at their university based on their grades, not based on their will, not based on their interest. So what is your expectation from someone you put it in some department that he doesn't want to belong to there? And this is, and again, there is a law stopping this student in the future to change the career. So if he put in, so for the rest of his life will be in the same pathway which he hated from the first day he entered. So we need to change that, all the laws. And the current situation, from the primary school to the university, we have got a big issues. The biggest one, still we are on the classic style, based on memorization and retrieving information. But nowadays, and this all teacher-centered rather than student-centered. So we need all these change to be done.
I'm glad both of you, Kak Sirwan and yourself, are in accordance with this idea that the current system is not functioning very well, and it's rather outdated. So, and perhaps, Lindsay, I'll come to you after that. I'll come back to you, Kakazan, because there are a few issues to talk about and a few more questions. But Lindsay, if I may come to you, and basic question, how to create jobs?
Well, how do you create jobs, or how do you create graduates who are able to fill the job vacancies that exist at the moment? So I think that's two separate things. There's a lot of work that people like the station are doing around kind of entrepreneurship programs, moving from the public sector reliance into kind of growing a private sector. Is the focus on technology there the one that we actually need in order to create jobs? Are there opportunities to widen that approach into things like cake shops and smaller businesses that would actually create employment on the ground? The other part of that question, I would say, is around the graduate output and how to actually create graduates who are employable by the private sector. So when I talk to a lot of the UK companies, they are talking a lot about a skills shortage that then leads them to bring in people from overseas to fill jobs which Kurds could take themselves. So how do we get the Kurdish people into those jobs and prevent people from coming overseas to take the jobs? I would think that comes back to a certain point to the curriculum that the students are actually learning in university, that the curriculum could be described as outdated. It could be described, as you just mentioned, around rote learning, memorization, as opposed to actually students who are able to take initiative, who are fluent in English and Kurdish and other languages, who are able to computer literate. So if you look at the curriculum and the skills, the skills that students learn while they're at university, how could we make that more employable? And I think you mentioned internationalizing, and you also mentioned, sorry, just lose my voice, also mentioned coming to help yourselves. The answer is here in Kurdistan. There is nothing to stop a university, as far as I know, you might be able to correct me, looking for an international accreditation from somewhere like ACCSB, which is a business organization, for some of the curriculum at a subject level. And there's also nothing to stop universities looking externally to partner with universities in somewhere like the UK. It's just around being dedicated towards that strategy. Yeah. That then might improve the would improve the curriculum, and hopefully then from there the graduate output and the transferability of skills.
Yeah. Kaxiru, curriculum, it's an interesting topic because again, what you touched upon earlier is how to make universities relevant. And perhaps one of the ways in which you make universities relevant is by modernizing your curriculum, making sure that the curriculum is relevant to the job market. And I think this is one of the gaps that we see again and again, and we talk about it. We identified the problems, and yet there's no practical steps in finding solution to the problem that we are facing. What can we be done right now in order to make a curriculum more relevant and perhaps produce more students to the job market?
If I start from the end, you need to have a product, a graduate with particular graduate profile, will be specialized in a particular field, will have certain skills to do that job, will be able to think on his or her feet, could problem solve, could do adaptation. This is what we're aiming for. How we build that? We build that through curriculum. We need to devise our curriculum in a particular way that we enable our graduates. We teach them how to think, not what to think. They should be able to think for themselves. And the next step is, how do we teach it? We need to move away from the chalk and talk. We need to involve them. It has to be interactive. And the third part is the assessment. What is it that you're assessing? You need to move away from memorization. It should be banned to say, list this.
Yes.
Talk about this. We should move into standards that says, compare, evaluate, critically evaluate. And in the scientific fields, for example, if you're training an engineer in Erbil, in Hawler, and you ask them to build a building in a particular place, and you ask them for a foundation, they should know the area, they should know the geology, they should know the soil type. You give them the options, they should put 2 and 2 together, and they say, for this locale, this is the best type of foundation, because. When they start thinking, then I think we're away. So that's the person. Now, in terms of topics, and this is critical for finding jobs, is the priority areas we talked about.
Yes.
And now, if that's linked to the government, if linked to companies, then there will be opportunities. For example, if you start addressing, and this is something we have not done, we really should do, and we're late in doing, adaptation for climate change. There will be less water, high temperature, less agriculture. We cannot go on moving the way we do. So we need adaptations. Adaptations mean green jobs. There will be thousands of jobs which we need and we don't have. And for that, we really need help from our British partners to advance the cause.
Yeah. Lindsay, I'll come back to you again. One of the themes of this panel is attracting international business and attracting international partners between schools and universities abroad and with the schools and universities in Kurdistan. And you've been involved with such ideas and programs in the past, and also in your current status with bringing British education to Iraq. What are the challenges that you face when you bring these two bodies together?
Well, I think one of the major challenges is overcoming the barrier of actually a partnership with Iraq, with Kurdistan. So in people's minds in the UK, it's still a very dangerous place. Universities will use the excuse, oh, we cannot get insurance, UK government says we should not travel there. So there is this huge barrier to overcome, first of all, in that perception. And then from that, there is the barrier of what it is that we actually want to do with the partnership. So what are you asking a UK university, a UK organisation to do as part of your partner? And who are you asking? I'm working at the moment on projects to bring UK education to Iraq. I'm always asked, oh, can Oxford University come? Well, the answer is pretty much no. That is, it's around expectations, but it's also around what universities do. So Imperial College London is a really good example. It's a very highly ranked university. It specialises in science, technology, and engineering. And that's all it does. And it will only partner with organisations that are an equal ranking to them, or that have a particular area of interest that will be useful to them in their international research. And that's where, picking up on your conversation about research, Kurdistan has some really specialised areas of research like water, which will be of interest to UK universities. Very good, very high-ranking universities are really interested in the climate change agenda, seeking to partner with them on a project around, for example, water management, dust storms, that you are bringing something unique. So you're not asking them to partner because you want to set up a dual degree or a joint degree, or you're asking them for a specialist kind of like partnership. You are bringing something that you know about, they are bringing the international research standards, and together you are very strong, and then they will look at a partnership. So I think some of it is actually around being very clever about how you create those niche opportunities in the research agenda. if you partnered with Imperial on a paper about water resource management, it is going to be in internationally ranked journals. Internationally ranked journals count towards the international rankings, and so the university rise together. Just picking up on something, again, that I thought about overnight, one of the most successful programs that UK government ever ran with regards to partnerships in Kurdistan is a program called the Delphi Project. And that was actually very small amounts of money that were put together around about 2013 that partnered UK and Kurdish universities. And they worked on things like curriculum development, skills, employability, research. And they were very small part regards to money, but the impact in actual creating the partnerships was very strong. And even now, I know when you talk about the Delphi project, people say, oh, we had 6 of those projects in my university and they had a big impact. So it might be something that the Kurdish government could look at to relaunch a small Delphi project. And as you know, the Minister of Education in the UK at the moment is Kurdish. I'm sure he would be delighted to look at a project like that, but it would create those links at the bottom up that would allow you to then build a relationship that then becomes a bigger project.
Yes.
So it's around being smart.
Okay. Karzan, I'll come to you and then we will open the Q&A. So yourself, I, and both of our distinguished other speakers have familiarity with British system in education and in higher education. And also through that, we are much aware how educationists function around the world, particularly higher education. And this simple thing that all universities around the world, in good universities around the world, are categorized into 2 sections, research universities and teaching universities. The majority of universities in the UK are research universities and some are teaching universities. This is a simple thing and we haven't identified that in Kurdistan region. Perhaps there is a fundamental problem and it needs a quick solution but also an attention to the problem. Do you think we should start with categorizing our universities first and then move on with other programs?
I think to answer this question, I would like to give you a historical phase in developed country, how the university developed to the stage that tackling the need of the country. Basically is a 4 phase. The first phase, there used to be like a normal college, only teach and graduate student, which we were like this as well. And the second phase was teach and do research. So we are in that phase now. So after early 80s, 1980s, so the universities around the world took one step, which is the research must be a part of your teacher obligation duty and lead the student to be a researcher for the future. That's back to 1980s. And then the universities, particularly in the UK, they call it post-90s. So they divided it in 2 pathways. So intensive research university and job-orientated and market-orientated universities. So, but unfortunately, we are in the second phase. So we need a lot of work to be done to be able to be a part of the solution for the government as a higher education rather than a barriers. And a burden on the shoulder of the government. So before we go into that stage, I think we need to upgrade our curriculum. So our curriculum should be linked to industry before we go into like classifying them. And the second one, we need to train our staff, the professors and the lecturers and assistant lecturers. We need to train them into a standard international level. And I want to go back to the first point I mentioned it, the first aspect, which is law. We have got a problem with our current law of education and higher education, which is, this is a fundamental. It stops the connection between universities and the industries. We have got at universities, if we want to have a lecturer to give a lecture at our universities, they must come from theoretically background. But from 90s, early 90s, that thing's been changed. Yes, you need a teaching qualification, but you don't need an MSc or PhD to teach at universities.
Yes.
So you need to change that. That's by law, because you can bring the people from the industry and communicate with your lecturer, your staff at university, and be a part of that. Otherwise, you cannot from now orientate one university and say, please focus on the job market. Please, I need your graduate to get a job. So that is fundamental barrier which stops it become a wall between academic and industry. So unless you change that law, there is no way that you can, the higher education can play a great role. They have played a role, but they cannot play a great role in industry. Okay. And the graduate, we have the whole purpose of the university and higher education is a single reason to get a job. So we are not there yet. So we have to change all the laws, and we have to change all the guidelines. And frankly, to tell you, it took us 18 months to just put accreditation, which is a standard, which I thought we could do it in less than 2 weeks, but took us 18 months. So we have got a lot ahead of us to do before we classify.
I think it's a wonderful program, and unfortunately, and I think you agree with me, that the majority of our lecturers at universities disagree with the idea, even though it's one of the best moves that we've done in the past few years. And if I may add also one thing to what you said about the burden and about the old-fashioned system that we have at universities, especially for those who are not familiar with our public universities, that if you're a lecturer at Kurdistan University, any public university, you're a lecturer for life. And this is very unique around the world, which is a huge problem. What you touched upon, Kakas, and you said you need to train the lecturers. And that's one of the problems we have, that unfortunately, lecturers are not up to date with standards and with science. I'll open the floor for questions, but I think Axiron has one small...
I just wanted to add to what Dr. Kazan said. You could implement change in two different ways. There's the hard way, which is the law. You could also do it through a soft way, through incentives. One of the things we've done in one of the universities I worked in was encourage staff to do consultancy and research, and we used to allow them to keep 20% of the income.
Okay. We
used to allow them to spend another 20% of the income to go to conferences, to buy research equipment, to upgrade computers, to help MSc, PhD students, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Dr. Govant, I'll start with you, and then Dr. I'll take a few questions, then we can answer them accordingly. دكتور جوفان معك كيف بدنا.
Thanks for all of you. I am Professor Govan Sherwani. I was in charge of cultural relations at the Ministry of Higher Education from year 2009 to 2015. My question is to Ms. Lindsay. I was one who followed the Delphi program, but at that time we have also another initiative, which is BUIC, British University Iraq Consortium. Do you think it's time now to revitalize this initiative? Because so far, despite all the development, still there is much to do with the support and collaboration with British University. If you agree, I think this is the time to revitalize this initiative promote the collaboration and partnership between Iraqi and region and British University. Thank you.
Thanks. Dr. Paula?
Thank you very much. I have some critical questions. I'm sorry. My question for Ms. Lindsay. We meet some Kurdish graduate students from UK. Do you think there is a double standard in the UK for foreigner and for home students?
Okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
For Mr. Kazan, this accreditation, do you think this accreditation should be done by independent?
By the government or by the public sector? Do you mean, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And is this the first step, or you plan for next step to give that for independent organization?
Okay.
And about also for you, Mr. Kazan, about the teachers to make a research. How can teacher make a research if they don't make job as teaching job? Because one university, for example, need 2,000 students in 1 year. They must take 6,000 to 7,000 students per year. They have no time for research. That's a big problem. My next and last question for Mr. Siwan, my friend. The research environment is not in Kurdistan. Research environment and constructions is not in Kurdistan. We have to build it, and it must be a lot of rules for research and also good budgets. My large problem is now I have not technicians for maintenance my labs, and the education system is wrong. We don't build personnel to make to have a specialist in something, in everything. For example, IT or everything. I need a specialist in the equipment maintenance. I haven't here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Amal Khan. And by the way, you are free to ask in Kurdish.
بەیانتان باش دەستخۆشی بۆ ئەنجومەنی کاری کوردستانی بەریتانیەکەم کە بەڕاستی هەردوو پانێڵەکە دوو پانێڵی زۆر گرنگن بۆ کوردستان. سپاس بۆ پانێڵستە بەڕێزەکان. من داوا لە هەردوو بەڕێزان دکتۆر کارزان و دکتۆر سیروانە تاقیب بکەم. هەتا ئێستاوەی کە ئێمە لە کوردستان ئایبینین جامعاتێکی زۆرمان هەیە، بەڵام تا ئێستا جامعات کە باز لە دراسات و بحوسەکە جۆرێک لە بێمتمانەیی لەسەر بحوس و دراسات کردووە، چونکە بحوس و دراسات نەبوونەتە بنەمایەک بۆ سوڵتەکان لە هەرێمی کوردستان، حتا سوڵتە خاسەکانیش یانی دامەزراوە تایبەتەکانیش. بۆیە پێویستەکە جارێکی تر دراسەیەک لەسەر بحوس و دراسات بکرێتەوە. بەڕاستی ئەمە بۆ چیمانە؟ هەر بۆ ئەوەیە تەخەڕوجی پێ بکەین یان هەر بۆ ئەوەیە ماستەر و دکتۆرای پێبێنین؟ ئەمە یەکێکە لەو تاقیباتانەی کە بەڕاستی سقەی کەم کردوتەوە لەسەر دراسات. بەداخەوە تا ئێستا جامعاتی کوردستان و هەردوو وەزارەتی پەروەردە و خوێندنی باڵا بڕوانامە بەدەستێنێ. بڕوانامەیەکی زۆرمان هەیە، بەڵام کەمترین ئەزمموی اختصاسات و میهنیەتمان هەیە. من بۆ خۆم لە گەشت و گوزار یەکێک لە مەعاناتەکانمەوەیە کە بەڕاستی پەیمانگا و ئامادەیە پیشەیەکان و زانکۆکان نەیانتوانیوە دەستی کار بۆ سێکتەرەکانی حکوومەتی هەرێمی کوردستان دەستنیشان بکەن. دەبوو جامعاتی هەرێمی کوردستان بە تایبەت و گشتی لەگەڵ یعنی مواسی بێ لەگەڵ بەرنامەی کابینەی نۆیەم بە تایبەتی کە سێ سێکتەری دەستنیشان کردووە: سناعە، زراعە، سیاحە. بەڵام ئایا جامعات هاتوون لەسەر بەرنامەی کاری کابینەکە بێن دەستی کار بۆ ئەم سێ سێکتەرە ئامادە بکەن؟ بەداخەوە ئەوەی کە من تا ئێستا شتیایە هەژارین ئەوەیە کە دەرچووەکانی ئێمە کەمترین شارەزاییان هەیەواتە ئەوەندەی تیۆرین و تیۆریەکەش بەڕاستی منهەجێکی زۆر کۆنە کە هیوادارم لێرەوە من داواکەم ئەوەی کە پەیوەندی بە سێکتەرەکەی منەوەیە کە سیاحەیە گۆڕانکاریێکی گەورە و ڕیشەیی لە پرۆگرامەکانی خوێندن بێ و هەڵگری ئەو بڕوانامانە دەبێت لانی کەمی شارەزاییەکی پسپۆڕی لە بواری سیاحە هەبێت و زمانێکی دووەم بزانێ بەداخەوە دەرچووی زانکۆن بەڵام تەنانەت زمانی عەرەبیش نازانن بۆیە ناتوانین لە ناو کەرتی گەشتیاریە هیچ سوودیان لێ ببینین. زۆر سپاس.
Many thanks. Dr. Saman Shali.
First, thank you for all the panelists. We have very interesting information. The question is, you guys has touched basically on three subject: quality and quality of research, workplace, the education and workplace, and accreditation. Then we can. Okay.
That's better.
Okay. Now, when we talk about the education, we needed the Ministry of Higher Education to be here and Ministry of Planning. The reason for that, they could answer some questions about the way they run the ministry. Now, we come to the quality. First of all, we have to evaluate the quality of university, not just quality of research. The universities, unfortunately, especially most of them, not all, most of them, they are becoming a business. Students come in, they graduated. There is no fail in a university. Maybe 1 year or not, but in the end they get their degree. And that is a disaster for education, because we are pumping student or graduate to the market and they have no knowledge. And that has to be evaluated again. And the quality of research, Dr. Sirwan talked about it, we need a lot of investment on it. And we don't have that investment, especially in the public university. Public university is systematically going down compared with the private where they have money. But the government, that government has to look again at the public university and has the quality of research to go up, and also the quality of the student. And unfortunately, the student at the public university also graduating with little knowledge, and interference of the political party at university is damaging our system. When we're talking about the public student to come to workplace, we don't have any planning. The Minister of Planning should ask the ministries and come to the needs of the market, also the private market, private investment, and also universities and the government, what's the need? Then they sit with the Ministry of Education and give them the need. And the Ministry of Education public that to all the universities, how they could address the need of the market. When we come to accreditation, sorry, I'm just,
That's fine.
I need the answer. The accreditation, we have accreditation. That is being demolished right now by the new system. The accreditation now in place at higher education, that will be abolished and the new system come in, or it's going to be re-evaluation of the current accreditation, because the accreditation is really very important, not just for quality of research, quality of the student and the teaching and all the stuff. It's not just one specific area. It's going to accreditation for all the system. Now, I agree with Dr. Pollard. in University of United Kingdom, which I'm proudly educated from there, I could say they have double standard. Student getting master degree or PhD, they coming back even they don't speak English well. That's a disaster because you guys commercialize that for us. That's a disaster. You sending a student without, not your standard, with lower standard. Even some universities teaching them in Arabic. What a disaster. Why is this happening in United States? United Kingdom, sorry. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And perhaps we could answer those 5 questions, and then if we have time, we'll come back to another round of questions. But to add what the majority of people said, just information, general information. The first university was established in 1968 in the Kurdistan region. Back then, it wasn't Kurdistan region. It was part of the autonomous region of Iraq. And since 1991, we had only one university in this part of the country, in Kurdistan region. And then after that, we've added a number of universities in major cities and small towns in Kurdistan. Lots of public sector universities, lots of private sector universities. We've added numbers, but it seems that what we are hearing from the panelists and you guys, that we've took our eyes off the ball and we didn't pay attention to quality. We just raised quantity of our education. Perhaps I could start with you, Dr. Karzan, with what we've been asked.
Yeah,
and you could
a few
answer.
questions. Like I start with Dr. Paula. Basically, when you look at the statistics, we have got the ratio between the staff to the students in higher education. I think we get in a good number. We have got around 11,500, and compare with the number of the students we have, it's a ratio of around no more than 16. But the international standard is 23 minimum. So we have got a problem with distribution and communication. So to allow our staff to do more research, we should distribute equally our task between our staffs. And that will solve the problem, because the ratio, we are doing great. Quality, we are not doing great. That's, if you, that satisfies your question. And the second question you asked about the research. We need to cultivate research culture in our universities. And for the first time, it was 2 weeks ago, we managed to allocate around 1 billion Iraqi dinars for the Minister of Higher Education, so they can do a research, but the research must be relevant to the other ministers, so they can serve the need of the country. And we promised that this is going to be a start, and we're hoping that the research culture will be implemented in the near future. So we have stepped in that way. So the next one is regarding, I think it's similar to Baraz Khanum now Katbicho.
Amal Khan.
Amal Khan. Amal Khan, yama دوشت كرد كا يما أو بيستاني وزارته يما إيش كان ممكن إيش ما نسر كردوا وفندش من تقديم كردوا بأميدين بتواني لعين ده بلام أو بروجة ناكري. بالنسبة كاك دكتور كمال شالي. I totally agree. That is the private sector. The universities belongs to the private sector. They are business orientated. And as you may know, that we are not allowing any more universities to be launched or opened, and we don't give any more license, and we have not done it any since this cabinet started. and we are not considering in the near future for opening a new private universities. Yes. And in terms of the accreditation, you asked a specific question, and your question is whether this accreditation body will replace the quality assurance at the Ministry of Higher Education. No. We are going to be a part to support them. Accreditation body, we are going to be the support for the both ministry, and both ministry, they have got the quality assurance. But what we want to put as international standards, and this international standards, we need to guide them. They will stay the same. They will implement our standards. So there is nothing conflict between what they are doing and what we establish it. And if you look at the definition of accreditation, it's external and independent. So it has to be external, outside of the universities and ministries and the schools and both ministries. It must be external. So and the other question, if I go back to someone asked whether this accreditation body will be independent in the future. I think we struggled a lot in Parliament because they want to clarify by law every single members in there. But they did not understand that purposely we did not put, and we didn't like highlight all the criteria to be there, because in the future we want to be an independent organization, which is normal in any countries around the world. But for this stage, it's an early stage for us. Maybe for another 5 years or another 10 years, it has to have a backup. It has to have a political backup. And now without political backup, we could not establish it. And from here, I would like to thank, His Excellency support the Prime Minister, and in addition to that, the Deputy Prime Minister put all his effort to make that happen. I really admire his support.
Okay.
That I think I covered it all.
Yep.
Okay.
And Lindsay, maybe you can answer some of the questions. Specifically, Dr. Saman Shali talked about the UK universities. I know you are not part of the government to answer that on behalf of the government, but...
yeah, so firstly, just to clarify that, I am not a representative of UK government, so if you've got problems with UK education, you should probably take them up with Consul General Erbil or British Embassy Baghdad. But I can comment on some of these things. Yeah. So firstly, the point about Buick. When I spoke last to Buick was about 2017. They were very much focused on student recruitment. So the only projects that they were moving forward were recruiting Kurdish students to the UK. They weren't interested at that time in building links and partnerships. So I think it would be better to look at a reimagining of Buick for that kind of partnership agenda. Just picking up on what you spoke about around this tension, because student recruitment is linked to income for a UK university, which comes back to your point in some ways about the standards of international students in UK universities. So there's a particularly good set of research around this tension between consumerism and education in a series of books called The Modernizing of Education. So how universities have become like McDonald's. So I'd encourage kind of some reading of that. Just to pick up on the standards point, because I was the director of the UK Government Quality Assurance Agency. The UK government does allow the delivery and assessment, the teaching and assessment of degrees in languages other than English. So it is possible to graduate with a master's or a bachelor's that has been studied 100% in another language. So you can actually get a UK degree studied in Chinese. So you don't necessarily speak any English at all for that, and that is legal in UK government, in UK higher education. The second point is that if you actually look in the UK system, there is a system called external examining. So everybody's work, you've got a degree, a business degree, you have a module, Introduction to Business. There is an external examining system in UK education where someone from outside the university comes in and looks at the standard of the student work and evaluates if the student work is of an equivalent and appropriate standard to other universities that they have worked in. The student work is looked at anonymously, and the external examiner does not know if that piece of work comes from a UK student or an international student. So the external examining system is there. However, I would also caveat that with the pass mark, there is a huge difference between a student who has bumped along at 40, 42, 44, or a student who has got a first at 70, 75. So there are those three points within the UK system.
Thank you. Doctor?
Thank you. The questions asked by Dr. Paula and Dr. Saman and Amal Khan and Kagovan. I feel your pain. I mean, let me start from that. I understand because I am part of it as an academic. There was an issue with private universities versus public universities. My understanding that private universities came in to strengthen the public universities because they will have the finance, they're going to have the better labs, and they're smaller, they're more agile, they'll be able to implement the change agenda and deliver quickly. But the problem we have is that really the fundamental decisions are business decisions and not academic decisions. Academicians need to make the decisions, not the business people. I think that's the issue is out there to explore why they didn't deliver. Because we look at the 35, 36 universities we have an army of students, we have an army of graduates, and they are not employable. And yet we carry on producing, it's like a production line. We're doing the same thing without changing. And it's the law of physics. If this action will create this reaction, create this product. Regarding Amal Khan, I was Minister of Agriculture and Water Resources for 3 years. Now, as a minister, I was looking for research, informed research, so I could make decisions based on it. I couldn't. I could not find research that will allow me to make regional, national level decisions based on that. I've tried. I tried to partner with universities. I signed a memorandum of understanding with the Minister of Higher Education then, so the lecturers could come and spend their sabbatical in a ministry and use ministry resources and work on ministry research and problems. It didn't work out. Now, could we do or couldn't we do it? The answer is yes, we can. Because then I couldn't achieve that. I did it myself with a small team. And yes, we published it at the international level. There's research going back 10 years, and this is the other things that we don't read and we don't follow up. We've researched and we identified 16 strategic products that we could grow in Kurdistan on our soil to reach food sufficiency and security. We studied the impact of master plan on agricultural land. And I could tell you now, if we implement the current master plan, we're going to lose between 25 to 27% of our best agricultural land. Why? Because our ancestors were very clever. They built our cities on the best agricultural land. We're an agricultural society where there was good soil and good water. Now the city is growing. We're putting our best soil under concrete. And now we are surprised when the rain we get flood. It's called flash floods. The water has nowhere to go. It accumulates and causes floods.
Okay, thank
I'll leave it there.
Since we have time, I'll take 2 more questions, and then we will have lunch. And the second panel, the last panel, I should tell you that it starts at 2 o'clock sharp. So a couple of questions. Yes, please.
سپاس بۆ هەمووتان. کاکن هەرو دوو پرسیارم هەنە. پرسیار یەکەم لۆ خاتون ڤیکتۆریا من خاون کارگە و خاون بزنسم یعنی لە کەرتی تایبەتەوە خەمی کەرتی تایبەتم هەیە بیرۆکەکمان هەیە وەکو پرسیار لە بەڕێستام بکەم ئایا دەکرێت فرسەتێکی بزنس بدۆزینەوە بۆ دروستکردنی موسسەیەک یان مرکزێکی علمی بۆ تدریبکردن یان تعلیمدانی کەوادر لە بۆ بازار من خەمی ئەومە ینی زانکۆکان دەوری خۆیان جێراوە بەڵام وەکو پێویست نییە بەڵام ئەگە لەگە بەریتانیا دەتانی شتێک دروستکەین وەکو بزنسێک بتوانین بەعملی کەوادر پێ بگەینین بە تایبەتی لە بۆ کارگەکان ئەو پرسیاری یەکەم ئێمە ینی خاوەن کارگەمە و لێرەش چەند کارگەی ڕۆنی ئۆتۆمبیل و کارگەی پلاستیک و ینی بەعام قسە دەکەین وەکو کەرتی پیشەسازی ینی پێگەیاندنی کەوادر لە بۆ کەرتی پیشەسازی ئەوە پرسیاری یەکەمە لەوێت چۆن فرسەتێک دەدۆزرێتەوە پرسیاری دووەم هەم لە بۆ هەرسێکتان جەنابیشت بە حکمی بەڕێزان هیوادارم بتوانن حکومەتی هەرێم لە نەزەری ببتە عملی گەورەترین گرفتیمە ئەوەیە لە عملی زەعیفین بە قسە زۆر بەهێزە هەموو شتێکی بەهێزە کەرتی تایبەت لەوانەیە لێرە خەڵکێکی زۆر هەبێت لە بزنس یان لە کەرتی پیشەسازی نوقسانیمان زۆرە کەوادری زانکۆکان توانای نییە تەکمیلە و ئیدامە و پاڵپشتی مەبی لە پیشەسازی کادرێکتان نییە بتوانی بۆ مدیری ئینتاج کادرێکت پێنەگەیاندیە لە بۆ ئەوەی بتوانی مەچینەیەک چاپکاتەوە ئیدارەی مستەودعات شارەزانیە مارکێتینگ شارەزانیە محاسبێک لە زانکۆیەکانی گۆ تەخەڕوج دەکا دێتە لایمە ئیش دەکات نازانێ لەسەر بەرنامەزێکی حسابی موحەد ئیش بکە هیوادارم معمەلەکانی ئێمە بزنسەکانی ئێمە بیکەنە وەحدەیەک لای خۆتان ئالیەتێک بدۆزنەوە ئێمەش مستعدین هاریکاری ئێوەین بۆی بتوانین بازاری کار بەهێزتر بکەین و ئابووری وڵاتیش بەهێزترکەن زۆر سپاس.
One more question please because I don't have time. I know lots of you have raised.
Thank you Chairman, thank you for KBBC for this important. My name is Sherwan Mustafa from IPBL Iraqi Private Banks League. My question to Mr. Sherwan, what about the let us say international virtual training platforms? Do you think that could help? We manage small program under the umbrella of Central Bank. It's supported by Temkin Fund, it's CSR, with the 12 universities, including Salahuddin University. We think that it could help. It could help a lot. Especially they can, some of the platforms like Coursera, for example, use the augmented reality training in practical issues, like something like this. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. If you can answer very briefly, because we have to conclude in 5 minutes. Yeah. Okay.
So the answer to the question about the training centre, the project that I'm currently working on, which is founded by myself and John Tucknott, who's the former Chargé d'Affaires for Iraq, is actually specifically to fill that gap. So we're looking at how we can bring UK education, training and vocational training centres, English language to Kurdistan. So I'd be very happy to talk about that.
Okay.
I'm glad you raised the issue of training. I'll go back to a point I made earlier. I don't think there is anything wrong with the raw material. I think we have the brains. Let me put it that way. Because when our students come abroad, when staff go abroad, they excel. They not be able to do it here. So, and let's not forget that we have a huge workforce in universities. It's still the same brain, the same excellent raw material. We need to train them and retrain them. We need to redirect them with a new reality, with a new technology, with the new trends, perhaps with help with our British partners. Any form of training will help. Virtual will help too. Thank you.
Karzan?
دەست خۆش بێ بەڕێز هەموو ئەگەر لە ئەوڵەوە دەستم پێکرد بێ هەموو شتەکانی من لەسەر ئەوە بوو چۆن زانکۆکان بتوانن خزمەتی پیشەسازی بکەن ئێمە ئیشارەتیشم بەوەدا وتم ئێستا کۆمەڵی یاسا هەیە دەست و کۆتی گرتوینە ئێمە وردە ئەو یاسایانە بەروشێوەیەک دەبین یان گۆڕانکاری بەسەر بێ ئێمە وەکو حکومەت کاریان لەسەر دەکەین و کاری جدیشمان لەسەر کردو ئەمەیەکێ وەکو یاساکان دومیش ئەوەی کە ئێستا ئێمە کردومانە ستاندەردی نێودەوڵەتی بەکاردێنین تکە ستاندەردمان بەکارهێنا و کاتە بە ئومێدین بتوانێت ئیشی ئێوەش خزمەت بکات بینەوە سەر ئاخیر پرسیاری کە جەناب لەو بەڕێزت پرسیار کرد بەڵێ زۆر شت هەیە ئەتوانن ئێوە ئێستا بیکەن ئێستا حالیان ئێمە لە سێ بوارە ئێمە لە بواری تەکنۆلۆژیاین و ناشزانین تەکنۆلۆژی بۆ چۆمانە بات یعنی بیرکەنەوە 10 ساڵ لەمەوە پێش چۆن بوو 20 ساڵ لەمەوە پێش چۆن بوو یعنی ئەگەر 30 ساڵ لەمەوە پێش چۆن بوو تەکنۆلۆژی بە تایبەتی ئایتی بەرەو چۆمان دەبا خۆشمان نازانین لەم کاتەیە لەبەرەوە حتا ئینڤێستمنت پارە بێتە ئەو بەشەوە بۆ پراڤێت سێکتە قازانجە بۆ حکوومەتیش قازانجە ئێمە وەکو حکوومەت یعنی ئێستا حالیان وا دەکەین یعنی خۆتان دەزانن ئەمن نامەوێت زۆر خۆتان لە من شارەزاترن یعنی ئێستا سعوبەیەکی من زۆر قورسە ئێمە تەنها دەتوانین معاشەکە دوانەکەوێ مانگی پێش و 15 ڕۆژ داکە ئەم مانگە محاولەکە لە هەفتێکە معاشەکە بین یعنی ئەمە زەرورەتی بە کۆمەڵگەی خەڵکەوە بەڵام لە هیچ کابینەیەکشە و من دەمەوێت ڕخنە لە خۆم بگرم پێشەوەی ڕخنە لە کابینێکی کە بگرم یان لە کەسی کە بگرن و ڕخنەشم لەو کەسانە گرتووە کە پێشتر لەم پۆزیشنەی من بوون چۆن سەرۆک وەزیرەکان یان سەرۆکی هەرێمیان یعنی پوش نەکردووە کەوا لەبارەی ئەو حەلەقەیەی بینی زانکۆکان و ئینداستری نەشکێنن بەوەی کە پارێک تەرخان بکرێ بۆ توێژینەوە و لێکۆڵینەوە و داهێنان و ئێمە لەم حکومەتە بەم هەموو سوعبەی خۆمانەوە بەم هەموو قورسایی کە لەسەرمانە و ئەزانم ئیتر ئەمە قورساییەکە یعنی ئیمڕۆ دەوەستینەوە لەسەر قاچەکانی خۆمان و ئیشەڵڵا دەربازیشی دەکەین و بە ئومێدین ئێمە چاومان لەسەر ئەوەیە لە توێژینەوە و لێکۆڵینەوە و داهێنانە پارەمان تەرخان کردو پارەکە زۆر کەمە زۆر کەمە ئەمە لەگەڵتان بەڵام کاش ئێوەکەین ئێوەش لەو بارەیە بێن پێش شت زۆر هەیە وەگەر حەزیش کرد ئێستا دێڵێن وەگەر حەزیش کرد لە دوایە توانی بە تایبەت قسە بکەین لەسەری ئێستا حالیان پرۆگرامێک هەیە بۆ ئەو تەکنۆلۆژی دەڵێ ئەگەر ئێمە یەکێ سەپۆرتمان بکا لە کوردستانە ئەگەر لە کوردستانیش ئیشیان دەست نەکەوێ لە کۆمپانیان نێودەوڵەتەکان بە مەرجی ئەوەی لە 185 ئیشیان دەستکەوێ بە ترێنینێکی سێمانگی بتوانن لەم سێ بوارەیە بە کۆدە ئەبێتە کۆدە دەبێتە سایبەر سەکیۆریتی دەبێت لیدە لە هەر سێ بوارەکەیە ترێنینیان پێ دەکات ئەگەر خۆشمان ئیشمان نەبێ بۆمان بکە لە کۆمپانیا نێودەوڵەتەکان بتوانن وەرگرن بەڵێ مەجاڵتان هەیە تکایە هاوکار بن
زۆر سپاس زۆر بە کورتی دکتۆر سیروان چونکە کاتەکە نەما بەدا.
Okay, very briefly because you look hungry. I know that. We talked about everything, but we didn't talk how. We need a plan. Our problem is we don't plan and we don't implement plans. Lots of people talk about strategic plans. I'm not going to call it, I'll just call it a roadmap because in Kurdistan you need to be very flexible. So we need a roadmap of what graduates we want to produce, what researchers we need to produce, what level we need to reach. You have to be very precise, it has to be itemized, you have to have deliverables, timelines, deadlines, and you need to review it every now and then. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much. I know some of you raised your hands, but unfortunately I don't have time. I should also remind you that after lunch at 2 o'clock, the last panel will start here at 2 o'clock. برزم بناوی هموتانو بناوی خوشمانو بر لکوتایی که جاریشتر هاو خمی خومن بو او کار ساعت نخواز راوی دوین رادگین که هر دو هاوکاران من دکتور کاوان اسماعیل و دکتور ادریس حمخان جانیان لدست ده زۆر سپاس بۆ ئامادەبوونتان و سەعات 2 لێرە پانێڵەکە دەست پێ دەکاتەوە زۆر سپاس.